What's the one thing you need more of in your art journey? More supplies? Maybe. More time? Definitely. More space? Sure. But I'm going to propose more simplicity. So today we're painting a gorgeously simple holiday wreath to get you in the spirit of the season and quick. There's 3 steps and a whole lot of joyful brush strokes that will get us there. Supplies today are simple. I'm using Arch's watercolor paper cold press. I'm using the pad version, not the block. I'm going to be using primarily a number 12 round brush. It's from my new brush collection coming soon. Or if you're watching this a year down the road, it's probably available now. You're definitely going to want to have a pencil handy or a few different types of pencils. Maybe some watercolor markers, and yeah, that's about it. Oh, and a little bit of white, whether that's white gouache or bleed-proof white or gesso, whatever floats your boat. But I want to make it clear, friends, if you have Crayolas and a brush that you grabbed out of your kid's paint cup and the whatever kind of supplies, if that's what you have, I want you to use those and be happy about it because you can still have success on this project with the whatever supplies. I'm going to be using some really simple marks throughout this project today, so I wanted to show them to you. Press and lift, or a press, drag, and lift for longer marks. I'm using the 1/4 inch dagger right now. I'm also going to be using that number 12 round brush a lot. You can press and lift, or you can press and drag horizontally and vertically to get different types of marks. So just keep that in mind as we work through the wreath today. You can also press and lift with just the tip of the brush to get really like spiky marks, and then we can do curly cues with just the tip of the brush. We're going to finish off detailing of the wreath with those curly cues later on today. So you might want to take a moment to try some of this practice. And friends, I am going to bring out a surprise brush today, the 3/4 inch dagger, and we're going to be doing some dry brush press and drag with that brush to fill in our wreath really quickly. So this would be a great little exercise, a great warm up. If you want to pause the video and give that a go, here is some press, drag, and lift with that 3/4 inch dagger. Ooh, it's so good. I love it so much. And even think about how you could load the brush with 2 different colors at the same time to add even more interest. We're also going to be using the liner brush, friends, for some watercolor sketching, and that's what I'm showing you here. Some simple leaf shapes based on a teardrop shape, some loosey-goosey twirly lines, so you get the drift. But let's get into the rest of the project. My watercolor paper is a rectangle, so I'm gonna just take a straight edge and turn it into a square. I'm eyeballing this, no measuring required. Now, I know watercolor wreaths can be a little scary at the beginning because you're like, well, I gotta get it in a circle and I don't want it to look lopsided. Here is my trick, and no, I don't draw out a circle. I pick 4 points and I make 2 or 3 marks on each of those 4 points. And those are my bounding marks for my entire wreath. And then I basically fill in between those 4 points throughout the entire project. And it works really well in making a circle and keeping the whole look balanced. You just want to make sure that the left and right points are kind of right across from each other and at the same level. And you want to make sure the same goes for the top and bottom points. You want to have those kind of straight up and down in a row. But again, eyeball it. This is an organic wreath. It doesn't need to be perfect. Let's take a look again at the first marks here. I'm using again the number 12 round brush. I'm loading up my brush. Decent amount of water, a good amount of paint. I've sprayed down my palette and I'm doing a press and lift, very little drag. Press and lift at 4 different points around the surface of the paper. And I'm basically creating kind of a compass. Press and lift, press and lift. Grab some peach, grab whatever color you want at this point for your second color, but that press and lift should continue and let your paint run out. I'm going for a more muted look today, so my colors are all gonna kind of be mixed with peach so that things stay toned down. If you don't have a peach and you want that toned down look, just mix your greens and your blues and whatever else you're using with the opposite of those colors on the color wheel. So if you want to tone down that green, mix a skosh of red in there. If you want to tone down that blue, a little bit of orange. And if you want to tone down a purple, a little bit of yellow. Okay, so that's our step one, establishing your circle with 4 points of marks. All right, I gotta know, did I blow your mind a little bit with how I established the circle of this wreath? Does that feel like kind of like an aha moment for you? If it does, head into comments and be like, yes, so that I know it's resonating. And friends, while you're at it, go ahead and give this video a boop. That's a like. I just love to know when you're here and you're watching, and when I get to see those boops, it makes me smile. So thank you. Next, you want to grab the biggest brush you have. You probably don't have what I'm using, which is a 3/4 inch dagger brush, and that's okay. A 3/4 inch flat wash brush or something close will work just fine. The point is to dry brush, and as you're watching here, you're getting a sense of what dry brush looks like. Don't worry, I'm going to repeat the footage and describe exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so you want to make sure that your brush is damp, just damp. You absolutely don't want water dripping off of that brush. And then you want to dampen the color on your palette, whether it's in the mixing tray or right in the pan, just a little bit. And you want to just scrape that damp brush over the color. You don't want a lot of color on the brush, so you're probably better off going for something that's already in the mixing tray so it can be nice and light and you can control that saturation. Just kind of scrape that very slightly damp brush over the color, and you might even want to test it out on a scrap piece of paper, and you're going to do a press, drag, and lift, almost like a sweeping motion. It's like a sweep across an area, and just let the size of the brush fill what space it fills naturally. And do that over and over again in between your 4 points that make up your circle, and you're going to start to see that round shape come to life very quickly. Let's take a look at that again, friends. It is a press, drag, and lift technique, but it's quicker. It's more of a sweep. If you want to know more about that technique, check the link below. And you want to make sure that the color you have loaded is very low saturation. So more water, less color, but at the same time, it's dry brush. So there's not a lot of moisture on your brush from either water or paint. So definitely give this a try on a scrap piece of paper, and then you'll be good to go. But honestly, there's no wrong mark here. You're just using marks to fill up the space in between your 4 points that make up the circle. And if you do put down a mark that's more saturated than you were hoping, brighter than you were hoping, go ahead, rinse your brush, get clean water on that brush, and put a little water over top of it. Pull up some of the color and use it elsewhere. And keep pulling up that heavy, bold area with clean water until it's lightened to the point where you're happy. Now I'm moving on, I'm grabbing my 1/4 inch dagger. You could just stick with the number 12 round or whatever round brush you have. And I'm using kind of an olive green color. You can see me mixing it there. It was a little too olivey, so I added some emerald green. And I'm blotting a little bit and then press and lift with that dagger edge of the brush. The dagger edge, so that curved edge. Press and lift, change the angle of your brush, and kind of create little V's or little sprays. And these start to just look like really sparse, like pine boughs. But again, remember, this is a simple stylized wreath. And you're gonna just continue this press and lift to get these skinny little scattery pine bough marks all around your circle. If you want to change your color up as you go, you just want to like load an additional color onto the tip of the brush, by all means, go for it. I've got a little blue right on the tip of my brush, so my pine needle shapes go from like a blue at the tip down to that olivey green, and just keep working around the whole surface of the circle. You might want to take a step back as you're about halfway through and make sure you're keeping kind of the density of the strokes similar as you work around. When you see my brush go out of view and I'm not mixing on the palette, that's when I'm taking a moment just to look. It takes a few seconds just to look and see where I need more of these strokes. So take that as your cue to also pause and evaluate your wreath as well. Are we having holiday fun yet? I hope we are. And friends, if you're watching this and it's not the holidays anymore, you could easily turn this into a spring wreath, a fall wreath, and maybe I need to do some more videos just about that. But just know, with the addition of a few dots and dabs and petals, this technique can apply to a lot of different seasons and a lot of different types of greenery and floral. You know, I want to show you that double loading technique that I talked about. I loaded my brush with a base color of green, and then before I touched the page, I added and dipped my brush with blue right from the pan. See how I did it there? And then press and drag and lift in a long skinny mark. Isn't that cool? And you can see that subtle two-tone happening in those strokes. And you can do that with any kind of stroke, a skinny one, a wider one. So definitely incorporate that into your piece. It adds so much dimension and so easily. All right, I'm bringing in the watercolor markers. I've got just a fun pink. You do you. You want a red, you want a burgundy, you want a purple, do what you want to do. We're going to add little clusters of circles. 2 or 3. Most of these are going to be 3. I like odd numbers. And one of those circles out of the 3 should be the largest, one should be a little smaller, and one should be the smallest. And then take a wet brush, you're gonna wanna work quickly, a wet brush, and just scrub in the middle of that round circle that you made to blend it out a little bit. You wanna kind of leave that outline. You don't have to get a perfect blend. The outline just feels right for the style of this wreath. All right, things are about to get interesting. Let me tell you what, you're gonna grab the biggest brush you have. I'm using the number 12 round. Friends, you wanna mix up in your mixing pan, tray, whatever you got, plate. You wanna mix up a nice juicy green, your favorite green. Maybe it's a bluish green, maybe it's olive green, maybe it's emerald. I don't care what color green it is. And you want it to be loaded heavy on that brush, and you want to make some splotches. And it's really just like a press and a controlled swirl. And very quickly, you want the paper to be wet. Go in with your pencil, start at the middle of your splotch and drag out some sketched leaves from the middle of your splotch. I swear I'm not losing my mind. I love using pencil in wet watercolor, but you gotta move quick. And then take a clean, damp brush and kind of do that sweeping motion again and let it drag out and fill into the graphite around it. Oh my gosh, I love this technique. And now we're gonna repeat that a couple times more. I didn't do all of the splotches at once because guess why? They would have dried too quick. If we let them dry, we're not gonna get that cool effect where the graphite drags out some of the wet color into the other parts of your painting. And that's what we're after. We want that graphite that we're now bringing in to really drag out into some other areas in our wreath. Whew, I feel like I'm out of breath because this is just so fun, but it's quick. This part of it is quick. So remember, you want these splotches to be like little puddles on your page. You want them to be wet because you want that color to move. See how that color is just moving with the friction that I'm applying with my pencil. And that gives you such a cool effect. So I'm just bringing out a stroke that's like a stem, and on the end of it, a little leaf. And look at how that is filling up this wreath. Don't forget to take a step back, evaluate, and see where you might need some more splotches. Or who knows, maybe other strokes. Maybe you want to add some more peach leaves at this point. You do you, boo. I'm going back into my berries now. They're still damp. I'm using a red watercolor marker, and I'm just doing a few little swirly controlled wiggles in the middle to just give a little definition, not a lot. I'm not doing a perfect fill. And then while those red marks in the berries are still wet, I'm going in with my pencil right over top, in the middle, some on the sides, and I'm adding a graphite dot. And like I said, some are gonna be in the middle, so the berry's kind of facing forward. Some are gonna be on the top or the side, so it looks like a side-facing berry, but that kind of dot or that fill in of graphite on those berries just gives them that little touch of realism in air quotes, and beautiful depth and dimension. And I am going in with a little bit of paper towel now, and I want some texture on some of those puddles, those splotches of color from before. So I'm using a little bit of a blotting technique with my paper towel to lift up some of the color. I usually don't love paper towel blotting, but here it makes sense because texture is king. It's time for the liner brush, but if you don't have a liner brush, please don't worry about it. Use a number 2 round or the very tip of your smallest round brush. And we're just gonna be adding some greenery filler. Now, I have an incredible video on creating different types of greenery filler. I'm gonna link it below, but for now, just know that we're basically making V's in descending size that are kind of nested inside of one another. And I'm doing that over and over and over again around the whole circle of the wreath. So here we go. There's the V, and then we're nesting more V's inside of the previous V. And they're getting smaller and the marks are getting shorter as we get towards the tip. And then at the tip of what we've just created, which is an evergreen bough, there's usually just one little stroke that denotes the tip. Feeling like I need some more berries. This time around I'm going through and they're smaller. Here's a tip for creating a wreath or any type of subject matter that is kind of symmetrical in a lot of ways. Work around the whole circumference, the whole surface of that circle or that silhouette, whatever it is. Keep working around so that the whole piece stays balanced as you work instead of kind of getting fixated on one part. Going in with a little yellow watercolor marker, filling in some of these open leaves that I sketched in earlier with pencil. And I'm just kind of letting it be scratchy and loose and letting the texture of the paper shine through. I will say this though, friends, at this point with your wreath, it's definitely a you do you boo moment, because at this point it's about adding detail, adding little moments that feel right to you. Now I want some contrast, so I've loaded up my big number 12 round with a really juicy blue-green, and I'm just going in with a press and lift that has a really tiny drag. So a press, tiny drag, and quick lift. And I'm just adding in some of those classic leaf shapes, tucking them into places. I'm working around the whole circumference of this circle silhouette to kind of make sure things stay balanced, but look at what that is adding. Notice my contrasting leaves here. They are little clusters of 2 or 3, but I'm definitely not making all 2 or 3 of those leaves in the cluster the same size. And that keeps things interesting. At least I think so. How we feeling? How we feeling? Are you painting along with me? If you are, go ahead into comments and say, I'm here. And you know what? Go ahead and say I'm here even if you're going to paint along with me later. All right, going in with that pink watercolor marker, and I am just scribbling. I am scribbling some scratchy pink moments throughout. I don't want the definition of more berries. I just want more pink. And so there, oh, this is so good. This is so freeing. You can scribble and it looks good. I love the texture when you use watercolor markers on watercolor paper, cold press, of course. The texture just shines through if you don't add any water to it. It's so good. Mixing up a little purple. Use what you have, use what you love, use your favorite purple, or use a purple watercolor marker or a purple watercolor pencil, whatever. And I'm going in with my liner brush and I'm sketching in some teeny tiny feathery leaves. And so these are narrower leaves and they do come to a point, but they're definitely like more lyrical, skinnier. They're kind of mimicking the silhouette of a classic feather shape. And I'm definitely not loading my brush really heavy. I want the color to run out to continue to add texture. I am not after contrast with this particular round of marks. I'm after just adding some fullness and a little bit of added color and definitely texture. Just a friendly reminder to take a break, make sure things are looking balanced, see if you need to fill in anywhere with any particular strokes. All right, it's time for those curly cues. I could barely wait. Use whatever color you love at this point. I just grabbed a little bit of that purple, and you're gonna keep your hand loose, keep your fingers loose, and you are gonna almost hover above, just barely touching the paper, and swirl, swirl, swirl. And you wanna just, like let them happen where it feels right. I'm trying not to stray too far out of the outer bounds of the brush strokes I've already laid down. I don't want it to get too wild. I like the kind of organically compact feel of this, but oh, the curly cues, they just add something so lovely. Friends, I noticed that those really dark blue-green areas, those leaves that I added a few moments ago, are still really wet. So I'm gonna take this opportunity to go a little mixed media. I'm going to grab some bleed-proof white and just dab in some heavy bleed-proof white into that blue just to see what happens. And as I expected, it's creating some really cool moments where the white and the blue are bleeding together. If you don't have bleed-proof white, a white gouache will work. You could use acrylic or gesso. Just make sure you keep it out of your watercolor palette. Really like that effect I'm getting, so I'm just gonna continue into those wet leaves and let it happen. I always say the wet page is an opportunity, so always be looking out for areas of your painting that are still wet. Honestly, I was shocked when I discovered they were still wet, so I was like, opportunity, ding, 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 and I'm so glad I went with it. Now, I'm gonna clean up my brush because it's inevitably got some blue on it, and I'm going to load up again with the bleed proof white and start detailing some of those splotch areas from before and turning them into leaves by adding veins. So it's one long vein down the center and then shorter veins kind of emanating out from the center vein. And you can easily turn some of those more abstract areas from earlier into actual leaf shapes. I am a sucker for a pop of white in a dark watercolor area. The contrast gets me every time. Now you could go ahead and grab a contrasting color. I'm feeling like I want to do the same thing that I did with the white and further define some of these peach leaves with a green or whatever really speaks to you at this point. But I'm loving some more of the textural definition that adding these veins is giving me. You could also do this with a pencil over top of watercolor, or you could bring in a fine liner, black marker, whatever you want to use at this point, but I love the added texture. Definitely another, what am I gonna say? You do you, boo moment. Now you could simplify this technique enough that this could become holiday cards, an ornament, or who knows, even a gift for someone really special. So watch this video next and see how I made some gifts recently for those that I love most. And until I see you again, I wish you tons of happy painting.